Music is the space between the notes. I think Claude Debussy made this statement, although it might have been Miles Davis. Regardless of who made this statement, I think a piece that really helps illustrate what this means is Claude Debussy's Clair de Lune. I know a lot of you have listened to this piece before, but just take a listen to the introduction again. There aren't that many notes, are there? But nevertheless, the piece immediately evokes such a strong feeling, even in the absence of notes. You're really listening to the reverberations and hearing the resonances of the piano. I think a lot of people would agree with me that this piece really makes you feel like you're floating on a cloud under a moonlit sky. The piece really creates that effect from the very beginning. However, the introduction of the piece is not the part that fascinates me the most. Rather, it's a little section around measure 43. Take a listen. This feels kind of like an arrival, but it still has that kind of floating quality. It's not really like you're arriving back to Earth, it's more like you're on a starship and you're finally breaking through the cloud layer on the way to space. I didn't really think much about this section until I started listening to the album Floral Shoppe by Macintosh Plus, specifically the track Divin with ECCO. For those who are unfamiliar with Macintosh Plus, who also goes by the name Vectroid, you may have heard of the genre of vaporwave. Or you may have at least heard the defining track of vaporwave, which is called Lisa Frank 420/Modern Computing, and yes, that's really what it's called. And if you don't think that you've listened to that track, maybe you've seen this meme that features the track. The aesthetic of vaporwave is at the same time dreamy, sweet, yet unresolved and unsettling. However, the creation of vaporwave music almost always follows the same blueprint. You take a 80s track or a smooth jazz track, and you slow it way down, and then you add reverb and all these effects until you get something that's completely different. And the most skilled vaporwave producers can create effects and feelings that the original artist may have never even intended or foreseen in the original track. I think a great example of this is actually the track Divin with ECCO. So this song is actually a slowed down and remixed version of the track Deja by Dancing Fantasy. Now here's Divin. I first heard this track driving home on the highway at night, and I can't think of a better time to listen to this. It's constantly moving and evolving, but the energy is always subdued and floaty. It's at once lonely and inviting. I love the way that the synth blips sound in the beginning, especially when they hit that high B note. When slowed down from the original version, that synth blip really seems to reverberate and expand, almost like a breath. It really creates a sense of warmth and space that you don't really get in the original recording. Now, I don't mean to say that Macintosh Plus really meant this track to relate at all to the Clair de Lune, nor do I mean to say that these two tracks are necessarily that similar. I guess you could say that both are in ternary form, meaning that you get an opening section, a middle section, and then an ending that kind of recalls themes and melodies from the beginning. The iconic opening melody of Clair de Lune is recalled after the middle section of the piece, although this time around the supporting harmony has a more minor quality to it, which I think is kind of neat. Similarly, Divin begins and ends with this slow synth blip melody. Perhaps both pieces' use of the ternary form was meant to provide a little bit of groundedness to counteract these pieces' ethereal quality. Something that these two pieces share, though, is their use of compositional techniques to create a sense of weightlessness in space. One is by highlighting the space between the notes, as I've just talked about, but the other is by either postponing important notes or denying them entirely. Now, to show you what I mean by this, let me play you the super catchy middle section of Divin with ECCO. The chord F# suspended 4 creates the effect that I'm talking about. The chord is screaming for you to resolve that B to an A#, like this. But you never get this in Chill Divin'. Instead, the loop just repeats and repeats without ever resolving for several minutes in the track. It's really very fascinating. And what's even more fascinating is that in the original Dancing Fantasy track, you only hear this little loop one time. I love the way that this progression sounds, and I always wondered why it kept getting stuck in my head after the first time I listened to it. And I think it's because that chord just builds this sweet anticipation that just never really gets resolved. You just keep wanting to hear more and more. And the fact that this loop has been slowed down and looped over and over again just makes that sense of anticipation even more effective. And now we get to that section of the Clair de Lune that I was mentioning earlier. The chord at the bottom of those cascading third chords is the same chord. It's the 7th suspended 4th. But the important thing is that Debussy actually resolves this for us. Instead of leaving us hanging like Macintosh Plus, Debussy gives us that C that we are waiting for toward the end of the measure. The effect is a feeling of lift and anticipation, followed by a moment of grounding before the piece lifts off again. Perhaps you could think of these measures as the piece catching its breath, checking the engines before finally ascending into the stratosphere. I listened to a lot of recordings of this piece where I feel like performers just kind of blow by this section. However, I feel that after listening to Chill Divin' with ECCO, I've come to appreciate the sweet anticipation that the suspended 4th creates, and the expressive possibilities that could be achieved with the use of this chord. And since Debussy resolves the 7th chord for us in a very satisfying way, I feel like we need to indulge in that sense of weightlessness and then resolution. And when it comes to indulging in a feeling of weightlessness, Vaporwave is a genre that really shows you how it's done. And that's why Chill Divin' with ECCO taught me a lot about Debussy's Clair de Lune.